saying that's what, 15, 20 feet already? In just matter of minutes.
Disrupted.
America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen. So one of our big developing stories that we have to mention at the top of this is what is going on in the heart of Texas with the ravaging floods that have devastated communities for days now, and it is not looking good, folks. So this is from Reuters. This is from yesterday, in the wee hours of yesterday morning, so the Sunday, saying death toll from Texas floods reaches 78, and Trump is planning to visit, from Reuters. But as of when we're recording this, it is at least north of 80 for the amount of people who have unfortunately passed with this devastating storm. They're still continuing to do search and rescues. There's many people still missing, and it is just absolutely devastating with, looks like, barely relief in sight. So, getting into this article here, the death toll from catastrophic floods in Texas reached at least 78 on Sunday, including 28 children, as the search for girls missing from a summer camp continue and fears of more flooding prompted evacuations of volunteer responders. Larry Letha, sheriff of Kerr County in Texas Hill Country, said 68 people had died in the flooding in his county, the epicenter of the flooding among the 28 children. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, speaking at a press conference on Sunday afternoon, said another 10 had died elsewhere in Texas and confirmed 41 were still missing. President Donald Trump sent his condolences to the victims and said he would probably visit the area on Friday. His administration has been in touch with Greg Abbott, he said. It's a horrible thing that took place, absolutely horrible. So we say God bless all the people that have gone through so much, and God bless the state of Texas, he told reporters as he left New Jersey. Among the most devastating impacts of the flooding occurred at Camp Mystic Summer Camp, a nearly century-old Christian girls' camp where 10 Camp Mystic campers and one counselor were still missing, according to the sheriff. It was nothing short of horrific to see what those young children went through, said Abbott, who noted he toured the area on Saturday and pledged to continue efforts to locate the missing. The flooding occurred after the nearby Guadalupe River broke its banks after torrential rain fell in central Texas area on Friday, the U.S. Independence Day holiday. Texas Division of Emergency Management Chief Nim Kidd said the destruction killed 3 people in Burnett County, 1 in Tom Green County, 5 in Travis County, and 1 in Williamson County. You will see the death toll rise today and tomorrow, said Freeman Martin, director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, also speaking on Sunday. Officials say that on Saturday, more than 850 people have been rescued, including some clingers to trees, after a sudden storm dumped up to 15 inches or 38 centimeters of rain across the region and about 85 miles or 140 kilometers northwest of San Antonio. So this is still, it's devastating. It's heartbreaking. There's still search and rescue teams to deal with the traumatic incidents, to look and find for these missing individuals in Texas. But one of the biggest things that was really eye-opening was the fact that there was barely alerts in this situation, that it was forecasted that there was going to be some substantial amount of rain, but as a result to DOGE, as a result to the Trump administration's previous actions in gutting out a lot of the services, including the National Weather Service, including FEMA help and response to situations like this, it really comes up short. And it really leaves the people in America devastating in a situation like this, where they just don't have the control to deal with this. So here, for example, this is from Call to Activism, saying, unbelievable, reporter. So reporter from CNN says, what is the fundamental failure of the federal government's responsibility to keep us safe? And Kristi Noem, who is also known as Ice Barbie, very famously known to, dash on the makeup before sending people to El Salvador. She kind of ignores that statement or that question and tries to backpedal the fact that, our administration is working on newer technology to deal with this. We're not dealing with the old system. Get prepared because things are happening. But it still doesn't help people at this moment when the National Weather Services had a huge amount of funding cut. They fired a bunch of people and gutted a lot of this program that was beneficial to a lot of Americans. So here's the response of what Kristi Noem said when that reporter asked about the response of the federal government.
Why was the National Weather Service not pinging their phones before 7 o'clock the day of 4th of July? We need the federal people to answer that maybe for us. I got updates at 7 o'clock, first one I heard. And I've heard updates throughout the week, but not before 7 o'clock in the morning. Wasn't that a fundamental failure of the federal government's responsibility to keep us safe?
Well, my background is...
So the reporter said that he didn't receive updates. He was in the area at the time, and he didn't receive any updates on the flooding till 7 o'clock. And I just want to show people, here is a map here of the river that overflowed, caused the flooding. And it says the Guadalupe's river rise on July 4th, 2025. A stream got at Hunt, Texas, captured the speed of the river's rise on the early morning of July 4th, 2025. The flash flood killed dozens of people in Texas Hill County. So you could see, looking at this graph here, that there was a pretty significant awareness way before 7 o'clock. And I know it's hard. It's very challenging to forecast an event like this. I understand that. Some meteorologists were predicting that it was only 12 inches. Some people were saying that, it was going to be more rain or less rain. It's hard to predict those things. But when there's significant rainfall coming your way as early as it looks like, 3 a.m., why is the National Weather Service only providing alert services to people way after the fact at 7 o'clock in the morning when the flooding is occurring, when people are already devastating, when the whole point of having that alert is to alert people beforehand so they have enough time to kind of prepare for the situation. So that is a bit of devastating from the federal government. And here's Kristi Noem's response to that.
Before I was in the secretary position here under the Trump administration, I was governor of South Dakota and served in Congress for 8 years before I was governor. And so I will tell you that for decades, for years, everybody knows that the weather is extremely difficult to predict, but also that the National Weather Service over the years at times has done well, and at times we have all wanted more time and more warning and more alerts and more notification. That is something, and one of the reasons that when President Trump took office, that he said he wanted to fix and is currently upgrading the technology, and the National Weather Service has indicated that with that and NOAA that we needed to renew this ancient system that has been left in place with the federal government for many, many years, and that is the reforms that are ongoing there. The timeline that I have, I don't oversee the National Weather Service. That's not under my department, but the timeline that I did receive from them was that the notifications started to look at its expansion for its limited flood impact area that started on July 3rd at 1:18 p.m. The flood watch was issued. Although it was moderate, it wasn't to the extremes that it was, that when the system came over the area that it stalled, it was much more water, much like I think we experienced during Harvey, the same type of system that was unpredictable in the way that it reacted and the way that it stopped right here and dumped unprecedented amounts of rain that caused a flooding event like this. They continued to elevate and up their notifications. when your notification hit your phone. Sir, I'm sorry, I can't speak to when that is, but I do carry your concerns back to the federal government and to President Trump, and we will do all we can to fix those kinds of things that may have felt like a failure to you and to your community members. But we know that everybody wants more warning time, and that's why we're working to upgrade the technologies that have been neglected by far too long to make sure that families have as much.
So to me, it just sounds like a big infomercial for this upcoming new technology system that's going to be so far advanced. Wouldn't you think, and maybe this is just me talking, maybe this is just my understanding of things, wouldn't you think at a point that instead of firing people and letting the National Weather Service fail in order to get the technological advances, you keep that old system running and then incorporate the two as you get the new technology? Wouldn't that make more sense? Wouldn't that make more sense than completely annihilating a very, very important service to a lot of people, especially in these regions that deal with natural disasters reoccurring? Wouldn't you think that would be, common sense in that area? But maybe she just doesn't have the mentality at this point, because as she stated, I'm not prone to these areas. I'm more concerned about locking up people and then having an orgasm on the fact that some brown guy is being locked and detained in a detention facility that looks like a concentration camp. That's Kristi Noem for you. So, here's just a bit of more highlighting just how devastating these floods are. And as I said, I understand it's hard to predict these certain conditions. It's hard to predict weather and how catastrophic something could be. But even if it was only, say 15 inches of rain, or if it's a certain footage of rain, if they know that there's catastrophic flooding, if they know that there's going to be this amount of precipitation, wouldn't it be better to alert the people anyway, with or without the correct measurements, that people are aware of the situation? Like, it's better to have the alert and find it unnecessary than to not have an alert at all and have this catastrophic damage. Again, just my perception of this, my common sense in this picture. But here is some footage here. So this is the river. You can see here, there's the river flowing in under an overpass here. And you can see it's fairly dry around the area. You can see it's kind of almost like wetlands area. So watch how just in a matter of minutes, this river overfloods to the point that it's taking down trees and overwrenching the overpass. Just in a matter of minutes. Watch this. Look at this. That is crazy. Look at that. That is unbelievable, folks. That is unbelievable how much rain fell to cause that much amount of flooding. And here is another example of this. This is from an actual Texas a Texas person on X here, Houston Flood, says, "Please do not victim shame. This is what a Texas Hill Country flash flood looks like." Who would victim shame this? I'm really scratching my head on that. Who would victim shame this? Who would be mocking a flash flood, and especially with children missing? Who would be victim shaming this? That's a weird statement there. But he highlighted right at the river, and I speed up the playback because it's a fairly lengthy video. But just watch how fast this river filled and how quickly the amount of rain, the amount of water being circulated down this river that seems pretty dry. Look at it. It's barely holding any water in a matter of minutes. And Kristi Noem, the federal response to the National Weather Service, did not send alerts until hours later after the fact. So watch this. You can see here, increase the playback speed a bit. You can see there's the water coming in. Look at that. That's just a matter of minutes. Completely dry. Now it's a roaring river. You can already see debris coming down. It's already going onto the banks. And if I speed up a bit of it. So there's about 5-10 minutes into it. Look at that. That is crazy. So it matter like not even 10 minutes. You had an area that was pretty much bone dry, now turning into this. And if we go a bit further, look at that. Look how devastating that is. So there's the overpass. Look at that. If I go even further in, look at that. Say that's what, 15, 20 feet already? In just a matter of minutes. Like I'm shocked that this guy is still recording on this overpass. If we go a bit further, like look at that, it's already hitting the bridge. It's already hitting the bridge. And now he's slowly trying to walk away. Look at it. Look at that. That is crazy. That is insane. So, that is chaotic, folks. That's chaotic, folks. And I get that it's hard to predict what a flood can do or what natural disasters can do. But you have an obligation as the federal government, as the state government, as the National Weather Service to at least try to inform people so that we wouldn't have the devastating death toll and the situation that we're currently in right now, where they completely did not did not prepare for a situation like this because of the massive amounts of cutting. So here, going back to the news coverage, this is called activism again, saying breaking: the Kerrville city manager blamed the media for crying wolf and hyping things up when asked why Texas authorities left so many campers in danger. 59 people have died. So the city manager of the county that got involved, the worst hit of this flood, is blaming the media and blaming the press for showcasing and highlighting the miscoordination of the National Weather Service that was cut and gutted, that did not alert these people, did not alert the campers. And this is like a cause and effect situation. You didn't alert people properly. And like I said, even if it was 20 feet or if it was only 12 feet, it's better to have the alert and get people prepared than is to not have this alert and go through this mess. So here's the city official, the manager, saying that people are crying wolf over this because the media is overhyping the situation. Listen.
How in the world you could have so many campers in the way of this danger and not taken out of there ahead of this war?
Yeah, that's the question of the hour. But with these, this is last time it was this bad, and this one is even worse than that. Was 1987. You can't predict it. Everybody in the media even knows, everybody who does this and sees this every single day, you have the inverse effect of if you continue to push it, and you see this in Houston areas all the time, you cry wolf. What happens when you continue to ramp things up and you continue to put a lot of information out there? Again, not to harp on the media, but there's a lot of stuff that gets overspun up, and we see that way too often, and then that trickles down. So we did look at stuff. Obviously, I had told the story. I was out on the river trail at 3:30. I left about 4 o'clock. We did not see any signs of the river rising, and by 5:20, we almost weren't able to get out of the park on the upper end. It rose that quickly.
How in the world you can have?
As he's talking about, the media overhyping a natural disaster and missing people and the failure to respond. I'm sure that CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, as soon as they break from this story, are going to try and overhype, the war in the Middle East, or they're going to overhype the, ICE cracking down on migrants, flooding into towns. Like, talk about, just the insanity rhetoric coming from people like this. Like, oh, they're overhyping a natural disaster and being concerned about campers and kids. But let's spend 24 hours a day talking about hyping up a war so we build up more tension, and we talk about anti-Semitism spreading like a disease across the world. Like, the one thing that doesn't get overhyped, they're complaining it's getting overhyped. Isn't that kind of ironic? That's hilarious. And that is the scapegoat for someone in his position because he screwed up. He knew that because of the cutbacks, because of the lack of response or the lack of initiative and responsibility of being in that position to at least alert people about these potential rainstorms, about alerting people in this regard, has been just an absolute disaster. It's a disaster within the operation to respond to a disaster. It's just absolutely crazy. It's absolutely chaotic. And this is just goes to show you that the people screaming the loudest about making America great again don't really have the obligation at this point to serve Americans. Because if they can't serve Americans at a situation like this, even Trump, look at what he did with North Carolina. North Carolina that's still dealing with the after effects of the hurricane when FEMA just said, forget it, I don't have the money because we spent it all on new migrants coming in. Trump just said, we're not going to deal with it. But we're going to cut all the services. We're going to cut all the funding in response to hurricanes, in the response to natural disasters, serving the needs of Americans, to siphon that towards the Pentagon so we serve the masters of foreign nations. Like Israel, like Ukraine. So this goes into this article here. This is from Time Magazine. Pointed this out. It says, experts question if Weather Service was operating at its best ahead of Texas floods amid Trump's cuts. So that's the ultimate $1 million question. Was the National Weather Service on point and maybe had a tiny glitch or maybe had a tiny mistake? I get that it's hard to, forecast exactly how much precipitation is going to fall, but how disastrously did this go? How much of a domino effect did this cause for the people of Texas? So, Texas communities are dealing with the impact of the deadly flash floods along the Guadalupe River, which have killed at least 80 people so far. So this is a recent article. Search and rescue efforts continue for those unaccounted for, including girls from the Camp Mystic summer camp, which Texas Governor Greg Abbott said was horrendously ravaged by the flood waters. As authorities and locals assembled to deal with the impact, some Texas officials raised concerns about the warnings they received from the National Weather Service, saying the predictions had underestimated the incoming rainfall and did not adequately prepare local authorities for what was to come. Meanwhile, meteorologists have said that the NWS said all it could do had done prior to the floods. Texas Division of Emergency Management Chief Nim Kidd told reporters at a press conference on Friday that the NWS authorities and forecasters did not predict the amount of rain we saw. We asked about the severity of the warnings he did see. Kidd said the original forecast that we received Wednesday from the National Weather Service predicted 3 to 5 inches of rain in the Concho Valley and 4 to 8 inches in the Hill Country. The amount of rain that fell at the specific location was never in any of those forecasts. So they highlighted all the other areas. Isn't that interesting? They highlighted all the other areas, but they didn't warn people. They didn't predict the amount of rainfall specifically where the floods are occurring. And that was from Wednesday. That's from Wednesday. So clearly they were not up to date on this. Clearly there was a flaw at the top level of the National Weather Alert Service. That they didn't predict this. That they didn't have the obligation to go back and do a reforecast, do a retake of more precipitation, more rainfall that was expected in this area. So this is a domino effect. This is a domino effect because once they fall, that means local authorities don't get alerted. That means meteorologists don't get alerted, which means people watching their news, watching their forecasts, they don't get alerted. And when a devastation like this comes about, people are screwed because they are improperly informed about the situation. It was not the only Texas official to call to question the weather notices. Dalton Rice, the city manager of Kerrville, said it dumped more rain than what was forecasted. Kirk County Judge Rob Kelly told reporters, "We did not know this flood was coming. Rest assured, no one knew this kind of flood was coming. We had floods all the time. When it rains, we get water. We had no reason to believe that this is going to be anything like what has happened before. None whatsoever." Kelly also said did not know what kind of warning, if any, the leaders at Camp Mystic would have received ahead of the flash floods. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which houses the NWS, is among the agencies that have experienced mass layoffs under the Trump administration, with firings of probationary employees starting just weeks after Trump returned to the White House. In May, the former directors of the NWS published an open letter to the American people warning that Trump's cuts leave the nation's official weather forecasting entity at a significant deficit, down more than 10% of its staffing, just as we head into the busiest time for severe storm predictions like tornadoes and hurricanes. Where have we heard this before? Where have we heard this before? That Trump got in, Doge came in, did all these cuts, fired a bunch of people, told us that there was a bunch of fraud in different places, so we're just going to do a mass cut of all these services. Not going into the Pentagon, obviously, because why would we go into the massive contributors of fraud and lack of ambition to the American public? Why would we go into the Pentagon? Even Steve Bannon said, if you're going to do massive cuts, you're going to have to go into the Pentagon. That's the only way we can get ourselves out of this. But no, they went after Medicaid. They went after Social Security. They went after the weather services. And then what happened? The lack of funding, the lack of staffers made this agency worse off, and it affected a huge amount of people. Just like how air traffic controllers, when they got laid off, when there was a huge lack of funding for the air traffic controllers, all of a sudden we're seeing a lot more of these instances of plane crashes and faulty starts and faulty landings at airports, because we did not give the funding and proper contribution to these agencies that benefit a lot more Americans than Americans realize, because Americans are sucked into the propaganda. They're sucked into the fact that, oh, there's so much fraud everywhere. Fraud is all over the place. We got to do these massive cuts. Take it all away. And people jump on board with that. Look, I understand taking down fraudsters. I understand. Yes, there's a case-by-case awareness of certain people, taking abuse and frauding and scamming people. I understand that. But when you do this kind of level, this kind of mass takeover of these agencies and then firing people at whim, you're going to get these devastations. You're going to get these devastations. And all this money that they collected, that Elon Musk bragged about, how much money you're going to save by doing this mass, gutting of important programs, it's not going to Americans. It's not going back in the form of a check for you to make your lives better. It's going towards him. It's going towards the Pentagon. It's going towards his brethren like Peter Thiel at Palantir that wants to steal your data. So this is a domino effect. This is a domino effect. And people need to be aware of this. People need to understand this, that all these Doge cuts, which I thought, hey, you're looking at different fraud. You're looking at people that have, taken their power and abused it in certain ways. Look at USAID. I totally disagree with USAID. It didn't do anything for aid. It did not do anything productive in helping humanity whatsoever. But it's a domino effect when you do a massive gutting of all these important services at a time of need from the American public. A lot of Trump supporters are on Medicare. A lot of people depend on Social Security. A lot of people depend on the National Weather Service. And coming into, tornado season, hurricane season, and a lot of these natural disasters keep occurring, they're going to be more dependent on services like this than ever before. So how is this making America great again? How is this making America's life better, knowing that you're gutting important services that people rely and depend on so much, especially at times where they know that they're going to be more dependent on the National Weather Service when they know that natural disasters are about. So it's just a complete, utter devastation. The authors of the letter highlighted their fears, saying, "Our worst nightmare is that the weather forecast offices will be so understaffed that there will be needless loss of life. We know that's a nightmare shared by those on the forecasting front lines and by the people who depend on their efforts." Rick Spinard, the former administration of the NOAA, has addressed the current concerns, saying that while many of the weather forecast offices are not currently operating with full staff, it's too soon to tell if that impacted how the floods were forecasted and dealt with. A lot of the weather forecast offices now are not operating at full complement of staff, which means that you're really putting an extra burden on these folks. I don't know how much that was a factor in what happened in Texas this weekend, he said on Saturday. Without research, without staff to do the work, we can assume that the predictions are, and not just hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, wildfires, tsunamis for that matter, are undoubtedly going to degrade. And that means that people's ability to prepare for these storms will be compromised. So like I said, it's a domino effect. And just like we saw with the air traffic controllers, we're seeing a lot more incidences at airports where they don't have the needs, they don't have the people able to check on these aircrafts that are landing with huge amounts of people and in busiest airports. It is just absolutely devastating. It's a complete destruction of America at this point. When you don't have the basic services, they're gutting it out. They're siphoning every single ounce of resources that are necessary for Americans like this, and siphoning it out for the billionaires, siphoning it out for the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, siphoning out for Israel and Ukraine. That is what you get of the demise of America. That's the demise of America being sold to you by Donald Trump. That's why Donald Trump is ultimately a very good politician. Ultimately a very good politician. Because he's the salesman. He's the salesman that is selling the American public. And the American public, a lot of them are eating this up. Not everybody, but a lot of people are eating up the fact that, oh, we're going to take away these, services that so many people depend on, that maybe myself depend on. But because Trump is saying in such a eloquent fashion that I believe is going to be beneficial to me somehow. Look at Kristi Noem saying that, oh, we have newer technology coming. Hold on, folks. You're going to have a lot more floods. You're going to have a lot more, natural disasters that could cost your life. But hold on, folks, because if you stay with us, there may or may not be a chance that we get AI robotics or some sort of automated service that will automatically alert you instead of this heinous regard of people observing weather patterns. That's such ancient technology. And as I stated, why would you be gutting if you know there's going to be newer technology? Why would you gut something and leave people stranded, leave people out to dry until that new technology arrives? Why would you not just have the service continue until the point that new technology does come in, and then you incorporate the two? That's just common sense to me, but I'm not American. I'm not in the Trump administration. And for obvious reasons, I don't think I'd be allowed in the Trump administration. But that just goes to show you what a catastrophic domino effect is happening to America. And it's not just happening in America. It's happening all across the Western Hemisphere. It's happening all across the world. And people need to be aware of this. People need to be aware that this is the total destruction of your society in the hands of corrupted billionaires, in the corruption of oligarchs, in the corruption of international conglomeracies that have no obligation to serve any one of you. Period.